What's up, everybody, and welcome to the PPR podcast. This is going to be the Week 1 recap and Week 2 preview show. I'm Chase Izidoro, and I'm joined by our South Bay Game of the Week correspondent, Bowe Fertig. Bo, I think there's no better way to start this off than the Saturday Night Football, Mater Dei versus Cathedral. I'll take the reins on this one. To me, if I'm Mater Dei and I'm going back looking at the film, I got to be sick to my stomach.
Yep.
Because so many drives where the penalties just killed them or the turnovers ended up killing the drive, they very well could have won this game.
Well, you talk about the first score of the game by Cathedral, and a touchdown was actually taken back off of a holding call where Nankill rolled to the right, found Jerry McClure, and he did the rest for the score. Shortly after that, they punted it off their back of their own player. Cathedral scored. So that was one of the big penalties and turnovers that stood out early in that game.
And then another one later where, personal foul penalty for taunting drives them further back for the end zone. They end up throwing it, and it's an interception. I mean, it seemed like a constant throughout the whole night where Mater Dei could get rolling, but then it was one step forward, two steps backwards.
I caught up with Coach Joyner during halftime, and that was his big emphasis was we are literally one or two plays away from going into the half with the lead. They were down 14-7 at the half. So that was very disappointing, but Week 1, unfortunately, you experience those things. Those are some things that you experience in Week 1, and unfortunately, it bit Mater Dei.
And, kind of a hollow feeling where they feel like they're playing so well, but they keep going backwards. Another way, too, I don't think I've seen someone have 4 turnovers, but might be the best offensive player for both sides, and that was Dominic Nankill on the night.
Yeah, I thought Cathedral did a really good job on the defensive side. They forced his hand. They said, we're going to give up all of the deep balls over the top. We're not going to allow that. We're going to have Nankill scramble and run. And eventually, he just got a little gassed at the end. 62 rushing yards. He had a total of 106 rushing yards last season. So I think a little bit of it was he was a little gassed at the end. He tried to make some plays happen. He tried to throw one over the head of Madden, and Madden was just in the right place at the right time. So there were a few things that he did really well in Nankill, but then there was also some things that didn't go so well for him.
Absolutely, and I think that speaks the best about Cathedral's pass rush, only bringing 3-4 guys, and Nankill was running more than he did all of last year, really. And I think it speaks to the 3-star players on that team. Madden Farimo playing outside linebacker, but also covering as the nickel corner. Marcus Ratcliffe, an absolute nightmare over the middle. You don't want to throw anybody over there. No. And Victory Johnson being himself on an island, but then stopping the entire rush defense. I mean, that Cathedral defense, they might be replacing 10 starters on offense, but that scary defense from last year is very much alive and well.
Well, the things that stood out about those 3 guys that you just mentioned is the intelligence and the athleticism. You don't often hear intelligence from a sophomore player like Madden Farimo. It's a guy that, even at the end of the game, he saw that bubble screen coming. I asked him about it. He said, I just recognized a guard crossed my face, stepped in the passing lane, and got that interception. So it's so rare, obviously, the physical stature of this sophomore.
He doesn't look like a sophomore.
No,
you go up to him and you're like, dude, you got a couple more years here still? Yeah. It's incredible.
I think that was like the big storyline after the game. People didn't recognize that he was a sophomore. Going back to that base defense that Cathedral was running, they ran that 2 safeties over the top. Ratcliffe, at this point, obviously we haven't seen too much football. It's only Week 1, but he's the best safety in San Diego.
Oh, hands down.
Victory Johnson might be the best linebacker. He was left on the island in the middle of that field, and Mater Dei couldn't figure it out. They did run that RPO to begin the second half, but then they bring Ratcliffe down, so they adjusted well with that. But when you have, like I said, the intelligence and athleticism, you're able to do things on the defensive end that you're not able to do on really any other program.
For me, X factor was Madden, because he could be the off-ball linebacker, he could be the edge rusher when they want to rush 4, and then he's covering the wide receiver when they need to be in the nickel. I mean, that guy does everything, and he does it well at every phase. He was incredible for them, and it made it so tough for Mater Dei to really sustain their drives. They did well.
They couldn't establish the run game, is really the big factor in this one. When you're one-dimensional against a really good program like Cathedral with great defensive players, when you become that one-dimensional team, they're just able to sit back, pin their ears, and go after the quarterback. And unfortunately, they didn't have Nico Mosley. That was a huge hit. He was their starting running back last year. They brought in Anthony McMillan.
And we all know he's a good running back, and Snyder did well, even stepping in too.
McMillan has great size, but when you're matched on the other side with great size, it's a moot point. And they did bring in Chris Snyder. He's quicker than Anthony McMillan, but then Cathedral defense is also quicker as well. I'm actually surprised Cruz Estrada is not in the backfield right now. I would be surprised if they don't have him in the backfield by the end of the season.
I definitely could see that too. Just to touch on the Cathedral offense, obviously it's probably going to be a slow start for them, replacing so many guys, and I think we saw that in the first half. You start going into that second half, they did start sustaining drives, especially when they needed to go and win the game. Jack Stevens getting the first start looked all right. He had the one interception in the second half, but the big run that helped him get down to the red zone at the end, 66 passing yards, 50 yards rushing. I mean, it's not the scary Cathedral offense we've seen, but we might see that later down the line.
They were the prototypical Division I team with their size. Looking at it pregame, I was standing next to Burt Grossman, and we looked at each other and we thought this actually might be a different game than what we had anticipated. Cathedral definitely had the size up front, and as the game went on, they just leaned on them, and unfortunately, not that they crumbled, they still only held them to 28 points, which was really good compared, well, because the offense just couldn't really sustain any drives. But yeah, it was not a horrible effort on either side of the ball by Modern Day. They just played against a better program.
Absolutely. I thought they did well on defense at times, but at the end, it was just Cathedral's too much. Sean Doyle on the wing tee in the second half. It's when you're trailing, that's going to be very tough to overcome.
Yeah, and quickly to touch on the offense of Modern Day, Nankyo had a good game. Jerry McClure had certain moments where he shined. There was just certain players that just didn't touch the ball enough. I thought Estrada was one of those guys. He's an impact player on the offensive side, and I know they'll be looking to get the ball in his hands a little bit more. Nankyo, 62 rushing yards, had a total of 106 rushing yards last year, so that really played into the game plan of the Cathedral defense.
Yeah, and Modern Day, obviously, that's a tough one, because for me personally, I think they could still win. That game, they definitely could have.
It's a different game at the end of the season.
Yeah, you can't make those mistakes over and over and over again, especially penalty-wise against Cathedral, and expect to come out on top.
No, and I'm sure the coaching staff and players know that coming out of that game. And not that they should hang their heads, but it should almost give them a better sense, a better feeling that if we do correct those small things, we're right in it. Let's just go ahead and jump into the next game. Mercy in the Capitol. Lincoln traveling up north, beating a team that, for a lack of better terms, quit by the end of the third quarter. Lincoln won 55-0. What was your takeaway from that one?
Those poor souls in Sacramento. I do have to say this. Way to go to the Hive, because if there's one way you go out and represent San Diego, you go out there and make a team not come back out for the fourth quarter. So shout out to Lincoln, man. That's the way you represent. But, Roderick Robinson, 8 carries, 186 yards, 4 touchdowns in the first half.
Right.
Why does that seem like light work for him? It's a ridiculous stat line, but it seems like he just went out there and just did his thing and nobody could stop him again.
He's a human cheat code. I'm also calling him Baby Bowe from Tecmo Bowl. He also plays baseball as well, so that kind of fits.
Yeah, it works.
He's a guy that can also come out of the Wildcat. We've seen in some preseason games where he ran the Wildcat through a touchdown pass. So this guy can do it all. It's going to be really exciting. When you think about top running backs, you think about the P.T. Gates, you think about the Reggie Bushes from the past. This is a guy that's going to step in. Reminds me a little bit of Royce Freeman with his physical stature, and maybe Byron Cardwell, the old Saints player. He also played at Morris. He's now at Oregon doing well. The reason he reminds me of Byron is because he can line out wide. You rarely hear that from a guy that has the size and stature of Robinson, and he could do it just about everywhere on the offensive side.
When I filmed their scrimmage game against Patrick Henry, he ran one in, he threw one in, he caught one and ran it in, and then he put on the headset and they scored again. So I'm assuming he called one as well. So the one thing for me for Lincoln was, how is the quarterback going to play? KJ Chatham went out there, 166 yards, 3 touchdowns. Obviously not going to put up a big stat line when they probably pulled him. But I think he is going to be the key for how far this Lincoln team goes this year.
Yeah, all eyes are going to be on Robinson. Someone else is going to have to take the load, and Chatham did a really good job in week 1. It's going to come down to now, how do they look in week 2 against a really good program in Alemany?
Yeah, and we'll definitely be out there, so make the trip out there for you guys.
We do have LA reporters nowadays, so Brandon Stone did a really good job in preparing for that, so you can thank him, Lincoln, for getting coverage out there.
All right, cool. And then on to the next big, the upset of the weekend.
I would say so.
So Brawley, taking down Scripps, but there's also a bigger storyline here. Jax Leatherwood getting injured. More to talk on that?
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to be out for an extensive period of time. We don't know exactly what that period is, but it sounds like he was injured in that first half. They were in it the whole game. It was 13-13 at the half when Leatherwood went down. They had their wide receiver, senior Alex Ariado. He had 2 receiving touchdowns in that first half, then came in at quarterback. They had a last drive where they could have tied the game. They were down 2 scores. Ariado came down, brought it within 1 score, then had a chance at the end. But the Brawley defense at home. If you've never been out in the desert at a Brawley game or a Central game, the atmosphere is so great. It's that small town feel, and they definitely rallied around their Wildcats today.
Now, obviously losing Leatherwood's big for them, but shout out to Brawley because it was a tie game going into the half, and obviously losing him in the second half makes it a bit easier. But they were definitely in that game. By no means was this they got the win just because Jax wasn't there. Brawley showed up and they got the win against a very good Scripps team.
The guy that stood out most to me after watching film was senior Ethan Gutierrez. He was composed when they brought the pressure. He stepped up in the pocket, had a deep 66-yard touchdown over the middle. And then there was a few times where he'd look over in the flat, misstep by the linebacker, and threw one up the seam for a nice gain. So he showed the ability to go through multiple reads, showed the ability to elude pressure, and stay under composure when the pressure was brought.
And moving on to the next thing. So in the summer, I went to San Diego State. I shot the 7-on-7 game, and it was actually San Marcos playing Rancho Bernardo. San Marcos won. I believe it was really close. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I went to go interview the quarterback because he did a decent job, nothing great. And his name was Crete Macchielli. And so first thing I said was, how do you spell that? Because I've never heard of anybody named Crete before. But then he told me he's a freshman and actually still in the 8th grade graduating to be a freshman. So immediately I have all these negative thoughts in my head. This is a team that went 1-10, new coach. Obviously Tom Carroll's, he's got the lineage, so he'll probably be a good coach. But then they're going to be starting a freshman. So I'm thinking, all right, they're going to go out there, just give him a shot so they could, improve for the years to come. He goes out there.
Efficient.
RB is up 34-21 at half. They score 31 unanswered in the second half, and Crete goes 23 of 29 for a 79% completion percentage, 390 yards, and 5 tubs. What?
It helps that you have a receiver like Joshua Bell, who, pun intended, balled out, 8 receptions, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns, one of the better performances we saw from a wide receiver this week. When you have the skill guys, there were a lot of chirps this offseason that the skill players out of San Marcos should be on notice. They should be put on notice. These are guys that we should know about, and Ball was a guy in week 1 that is now on notice. We know about wide receiver, the senior Josh Ball. He had a great performance, and it helps that you have a quarterback that is also elusive. He could do it in multiple ways. And to score 31 unanswered in week 1, it's week 1. Sometimes you come out the gates a little slow.
Sure, but I mean, this kid was in 8th grade 2 months ago, let alone his first ever varsity start. This is his first time putting on the pads and the jersey for any high school
RB
game.
is no slouch.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how much about them this season, but from last season, it was the same old RB where they're a very aggressive and a very strong defensive team. And for them to be up on them and then go 31 unanswered in the second half, that's impressive. Let alone that this guy was in the 8th grade. He just graduated a couple months ago. Crete, I can't wait to see more from the kid.
The last time I remember San Marcos having 2 or 3 quality guys on the outside, Xavion Reese, JT Dozier, that was the last time the Knights were really good on the offensive end. And I'd say this year's team matches that.
Yeah, and it's week 1. So I'm not going to get too ahead of myself with San Marcos. But we do get to see them against Samir Mesa this next week, so that'll be a good test to see just who they are.
I agree.
And let's touch on the big performance of the weekend. Christopher Williams breaks the San Diego section record. 436 all-purpose yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6 to make it 7. He's the kicker, 7 for 7 on extra points, and a field goal to go on top of it. 52 points. They won 52-27. He did everything and breaks the record for.
I believe he also had 1 or 2 touchdowns brought back as well. So he could have broke the record for total points overall. As far as CIF San Diego section goes, the stats were started, I believe, in 1930-ish. So this is the new record, but before that, the record, I believe, was 55 points. So, but that, past that.
I mean,
Tri-sport athlete, plays soccer, plays baseball. He could really go D1 in any sport. He's going to catch up with Paul Rudy tomorrow. So you're going to become a fan of this kid really quick. Has great parents, and he could really do it all on the offensive side and defensive side.
Was our student athlete spotlight this last week as well. I mean, the kid does everything. And just for perspective, for any of you that might not be a kicker and might not be getting the points for extra points, you need to now score 9 touchdowns to break that record. So good luck. On to the preview for next week. We get to announce the games of the week now coming up, and it's no better way of starting off than the game of the week. Carlsbad at Mater Dei. I mean, that's Mater Dei has no time to sulk and no time to get over the Cathedral game. They got a Carlsbad team that hasn't even played yet going into this this week.
Well, and I think that is the advantage for Mater Dei, but also the disadvantage, because Mater Dei does have 1 game under their belt, but they have 1 less week to prepare and 1 less week to get healthy. We saw Lapizzi a bit banged up. We saw Edwards a bit banged up. So these guys need to get healthy with 1 day less of rest. So while I do feel when you have 1 game under your belt, that is a huge advantage going against a team that has no regular season games. But then you look at the experience of Carlsbad, they bring back Sayin.
Yep.
So these are guys that are a well-oiled machine. They know how to play. They played in big games. So it shouldn't be too big of a disadvantage for Carlsbad. But it will be interesting if Mater Dei goes 0-2. Is at the end of their season? No. They have 4 big games, Red Mountain week 3, then Lincoln week 4. If they happen to be 2-2, even 1-3, worst case scenario, they're still in Division 1. They might not be the representative for the open division, the top 4 teams only in the open division, but they'll still be a big contender at the end of the season, whether they win or lose this game. For me, it's the long-term vision. I'm sure the way Edwards was coming back and trying to impose his will in that second half shows me this kid has a huge heart. He's going to play no matter what he's dealing with. But at the same time, do you bring him back knowing that he's not 100%?
Yeah, if he is 100%, I've had ankle injuries too. I know, and especially when they're really bad ones like that, you are on 1 leg at that point. So I just want to highlight the heart he showed where he wasn't on the defensive side anymore. He just said, put me in at fullback. I could give you 3 yards worth of blocking and just 1 hit. And he set it up on one of the touchdowns. I mean, he wants to be out there. He was even limping off the field at times, but still had his helmet on. He was still the first guy in front of everyone on the sideline trying to get back in. Hopefully we see him back sooner than later. Will it be this week? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But it is a massive week, man. I mean, I think the advantage is that's going to be at Mater Dei because that Carlsbad crowd is raucous. I don't care if they haven't played a game yet or anything. If they're at Carlsbad, that's an advantage for them.
It's a different game.
Yeah, it's a different game. So I do think there is advantages. And, if you look at the stat line, you see them 4 turnovers against, or 5 turnovers against Cathedral. They really played better than that. So I think they can come back as long as they just clean it up. They could beat Carlsbad. I have no doubt about that.
Two of the best quarterbacks on the field in this one with Nankill and Sayin. It will be interesting to see. That's going to be a duel, and they both know it, so it'll be fun to watch. That game is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, great spectacle. I can't wait for that. So go ahead for North County.
Yeah, North County game of the week. Centennial traveling to Cathedral. We talked a little bit about Cathedral. Centennial with a 71-0 lead at the half. I believe they won 80-0 over their opponent in week 1.
Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, 71-0. That's not a misstatement. Yeah.
So
they can put up points.
Yeah. I will never doubt my Dons. I will never doubt Doyle and Montali to prepare their guys the best as possible. That said, I'm very close to doubting that they could get the win. I think the offense needs to show up because that was the one thing where they got off slow against Mater Dei in that first half. If they could get at least sustained drives better against Centennial, I mean, it's the number 9 team in the nation, number 3 in California. Centennial is a very beast to try to take down. The defense, I have all the faith in the world for Cathedral. It's can the offense be ready to go, and can they stay in the game? I think they maybe can, but we'll have to wait and see.
It'll be interesting to see how they match up front size-wise.
Yeah.
If they can control the tempo, if they can get those gritty yards, keep it 3rd and short, leave the playbook open, Cathedral has a really good chance of keeping the game close.
Yeah.
The last thing they want to see happen is going down 2 or 3 scores, and now they have to battle back. And they're just not a team that is, at least right now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the offense is ready for that right now. If they can somehow just have disruption that they got against Mater Dei, block block punt, interceptions, fumbles. That's where it needs to be done, where they can like, hey, we might turn the tide. Hey, let's run the clock down. If they can do that, I think they can pull it off. But if, like you said, if it gets out to 2 or 3 scores, I don't think this offense is ready for that at this moment.
We always talk about offense as putting up points, but we forget about the defense putting the offense in a good position and the special teams as well. And the defense and special teams for Cathedral in week 1 did their part.
And for the Jersey Mike City game of the week, we got 1-0 Steel Canyon against at 1-0 Madison. You got to cover Madison this last week against Otay Ranch. It was somewhat of a close game by halftime, but after that, Madison just took off.
Yeah, once again, week 1, just out the gates, coming out a little slow. They have a great quarterback, 2 bruising backs that can really pound the rock and beat down your defense. And for me, even it was actually more their defense that stood out to me more than their offense. They have a guy in Rankin that is sideline to sideline. One of the two, he's going to give, or I'm going to give him the early nod for a two-way player.
Yeah.
On the offensive end, he had I believe it was a 21-yard touchdown, but that offensive line just opened up lanes and big holes for that backfield all day. So that was nice to see from Rankin. On the defensive end, like I said, sideline to sideline, had multiple tackle for losses. And when you hear tackle for losses for a safety, it just shows you his ability to just be everywhere on the field.
Yeah, I got to watch them a lot for 7-on-7, and they were honestly the most impressive for me, especially the way Reggie Johnson looks this year compared to last year with the weapons he has. They can really go far in this thing this year. Rankin, though, I think the biggest standout. Just a dog. Yeah. Just an absolute dog. But then he's very controlled. He's very like the same slow heartbeat. You know, he doesn't get too high, too low. He's ready for the next play. Love that guy. But for Steel Canyon, you know, they beat Heritage 41-30. It was 41-16 going into the fourth quarter, so a couple extra late scores. Major Givens, I think he's, at least for a player that you can carry, that can carry you, I think it was like Christian Washington last year with Helix, where, I mean, that
so funny
they can just they could just give him the ball and he can go, because he's just so much better once he hits that second level. I mean, one of the touchdowns he scores is like, oh, he's gone. Like, and the next one he's like, oh yeah, no, good luck catching him. I mean, Madison would be a very good test for him and for the Steel team, but Madison's going to have their hands full.
That's going to be the matchup: is the front 7 of Madison versus Major Givens.
Yeah.
Givens can take it and he can give it.
Yeah.
And whether that's with the ball in his hands or picking up blocks, he does it in a variety of ways. He's a 3-down back. You talked about Christian Washington. I was actually going to mention Christian Washington. His lateral movement isn't as explosive as Washington's is, but he makes that up with his size. He's bigger than Washington. And when you talk about what a great name to put him with, Washington had 90 touches in the section championship game in the first round of the state playoffs.
Yeah.
They feed him the ball. He is the highlight on offense. It is the Major Givens show. He is going to be one of those guys, if he stays healthy at the end of the season, he'll be on the podium just because he's going to have the touches, he's going to have the yards, and he's going to have the scores for a big Division I
program. And he's well-deserving as
Right.
being one of the best players in this county,
Right.
without question.
I agree.
So your National City Miles of Cars, your South Bay game of the week.
It is the Battle of the Titans. Poway traveling to Eastlake. Last year, Poway did get the best of Eastlake 21-7. This year, I looked at the box score. Eastlake, unfortunately, with a tough loss in Apple Valley. They had to travel up north. That can be very difficult for a young program. They lost to Apple Valley 42-7, I believe. I was looking at the box score and didn't recognize any names. Eastlake lost a lot of guys. A couple transfers and more players just lost to graduation. Unfortunately, this is going to be I wouldn't say a rebuild year, but it's going to be a tough year for Eastlake with a lot of new faces. Fortunately, Eastlake has a great head coach in Jose Mendoza. He's been in the South Bay for 30-plus years. He knows that program well. He knows how to coach his kids up. And they'll be better prepared for Poway. But I know you were a big fan of Connor Rath, the running back out of Poway.
Huge. So me and Nick James and I, every weekend we would go grab the plays of the week. And it's just like, all right, just write it down, see who had the best thing, and we'll cut this down to 4, right? Connor Rath's on there every week because every week he's taking 180 yards to the house. I mean, he was ridiculous. I think he averaged 10 yards a touch last year. That guy can be someone that helps carry this Poway team, but he's not the only guy. I mean, their quarterback's very good in Curry. They had a very good defensive showing from Peyton Spratt, 13 total tackles. I mean, this Poway team is very good, and I think it's going to be a tough test for Eastlake. They got to show up because this Poway team can get on you early.
Another podium nod for Rath, 28 rushes for 148 yards and a couple scores. Poway is another one of those teams where they're just going to lean on you until you crumble, and they're going to really rely on this running game. Obviously, 28 touches. I don't know how long you're going to be able to sustain that. Only 3 completions, 3 receptions, obviously, for Poway. So they really rely on that rushing attack. I think it's going to make it a little easier for an Eastlake team just to concentrate on Rath in the backfield. Last year, Rath, I believe, 13 rushes for 86 yards and a couple scores. So this Poway team is built for a good run down in Division 1. It'll be interesting to see how Eastlake comes out in week 2 after a tough loss against Apple Valley.
And then finally, our El Cajon Ford East County game of the week. 0-1 Granite Hills at 0-1 Valhalla. Granite Hills was actually down 21-16 to Poway at halftime, so they were very much in that game, and then Poway pulled ahead late. Valhalla, they had lost also in week 1, but Granite Hills beat Valhalla last year 52-0. Expecting something of the same?
Yeah, Granite Hills was up early 10-0 in week 1. So and we talked about special teams. Poway with that big, they had a big kickoff that went to the house. And gosh, what was the guy's name? Butler, Josh Butler. And I want to say that's the brother of another Butler from Poway who was a big offensive cog in that Titan offense. So that'll be interesting to see offensive, defensively, and special teams. Granite Hills, you talk about Joaquin Thomas Jr. This is the one guy that stands out above the rest. He's an athlete. And this is a guy that can really take over a game against a Valhalla team. I know he had a big game against Valhalla last year, so I expect a lot of the same. Yeah, and we need to see Valhalla really step up to this one because Granite Hills is still reeling from the first loss. It'll be a tough test for them, but we'll see if the Norsemen can step up, man. Yeah. And final words, what do you got to say? A big shout out to Olympian head coach Jimmy Clark, an old teammate from Chula Vista, and in his second year as head coach got his first varsity win. A convincing win over Westview, 21-0 at Westview. I spoke with him a little bit after the game, and he said that black wave at Westview is definitely something that should be experienced at every high school. He said the energy was live, and it was great to silence them in a big week 1 win. So congratulations to Jimmy Clark. And another big South Bay win as well. Yeah, big shout out Southwest High School. First varsity win in the last 2 seasons, beating Tri-City Christian 20-18. So big shout out to you guys. Good job getting back on the and I believe record. The head coach, if he's still there, I should know this right now because I am the South Bay guy. South Bay. Come on. He was the old Marion Catholic coach. Oh, nice. He played with P.T. Gates. He was a cornerback, a really good athlete in Cruz. So it's great to see South Bay guys hang around and do well for programs that really need a step in the right direction. Awesome. So I think that's about does it for week 1 and on to week 2. Yeah, it should be a good one. Yeah, so that's going to do it for us. We'll catch you guys next Monday. Take care. See you next time.